Hi everyone, for this lesson we'll take a look at samples and surveys. And the first thing we're going to look at is the type of data. There are two types. One is quantitative, which is right here, the green box. And that type of data can be described numerically. For example, your age. Alright? And you can think of it as a data that involves measurements. Okay? The other type of data is qualitative, which is this blue box here, and it can be described with words instead of numbers. For example, your hair color. And instead of using measurements, we put them into categories. Alright, so let's take a look at data sets. Now, if a data set is univariate, then it only uses one variable. Okay, for example, just your height, for instance. Now, if a data set is bivariate, then it uses two variables. For example, you can compare the height and the weight. When you're collecting data, there are two things you need to think about. One is the entire population. So think of it as this black outline here. So that represents everyone, right? So that's the entire group. Now, if you only have a subset of the entire group, that's referred to as the sample of the population. Sometimes it makes more sense just to look at the sample and not the entire population. That is, if the population is too large, then it's more effective to just look at a small sample of that population that will represent the entire population. Alright, so now let's take a look at three different sampling methods. The first one is by way of randomization, and that is the random sampling method, and that's when you survey at random. The second one is the systematic method, and that's when you survey every nth person. So for example, you can survey every 7th person on the list. And the third one is the stratified method, and that's when you separate the population into smaller groups and then survey at random within the groups. Alright, the last concept we're going to look at is bias, and you can have bias samples or even bias survey questions, and that's when there are assumptions that may or may not be true, which can result in a misrepresentation of the population. So when we're collecting data, we'll try to avoid bias in the data set. And the best way to avoid bias is through randomization. And we're done. And we're happy.